Good evening, folks. Tonight we are going to do Genesis 9, and as I was reading through it, I didn't see anything that was too controversial. A couple of things that have come up in past videos, and then the whole ordeal of Ham and what that really means, but should be a fairly short one tonight because of that. So I'm going to jump right into it. Again, I'm going to be reading from the King James, but hey Grayson, we're doing Genesis 9 tonight. Hey Steve. But I'm going to be reading from the King James, but I have the ESV open as well for clarification whenever the King James gets a little too archaic for our taste here. So Genesis chapter 9, and yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to do them. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and it just seemed like a good time to get started. So Genesis chapter 9 verse 1, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And again here we have this idea of Elohim, the creator God, coming down off of this very powerful, probably the second most powerful event in recorded biblical history here. Of course, the first being the creation of the universe. But the second one here is the wiping out of all life on the planet. Of course, we're talking as men talk. We're not talking necessarily as the most important events that transpired, but definitely in terms of just raw power. I think this is probably the second most powerful one that God has done, second only to creation itself. So we're talking about Elohim at this point, and I think that here too we're going to start to see, before the flood, we saw Jehovah walking with man, both in the Garden of Eden and I think afterwards as well. And there was this idea of a personal God walking with man, trying to convince man to be in a relationship with him, and it didn't work. Man saw all that was created and became enamored with all of the physical things, and it just drew him away from God for the most part. And then we only saw a few righteous people from the line of Seth mentioned in this time. So verse 2, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moves upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. So beforehand, there's no fear. Animals didn't fear man. We saw that all of the animals were brought to Adam, and he named all of the kinds of animals. Since there was no indication that mankind ate animals before this, they didn't have any reason to fear man. There was no preservation, no need for self-preservation, and we don't even have any indication that the animals ate each other at that time. So now things are changing, and it's because the whole environment has changed, and there's a need for the eating of animals. Every moving thing that lives shall be meat for you. That's food. Even as the green herb, which I have given, or the green herb have I given you all things. So he's hearkening back. God, Moses is the one writing here, but God is telling Noah, back in the beginning, I gave you all of the the vegetables and all the fruits to eat. Now I'm giving you all of the animals in the same way. And again, I think this is a strong indicator that there was no eating of meat before that. And then he says, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall you not eat. And again, it's important to remember this is Moses, and Moses is talking to the Israelite nation, these former slaves wandering around in the wilderness, and he's writing these things down, and he's setting up what we call types. And these types are events or objects or actions that have a meaning to the Israelites, but they're also going to have a forecasting or a future thing that they point to called the antitype. And that is what we see in the New Testament, or the New Covenant, particularly talking about blood having the life in it. We talk about the blood of Christ, or we talk about the animal sacrifices as being a type, or the perfect sacrifice of Christ is the antitype, or the flood that we just got done talking about in the last 3 chapters was a type pointing to the New Testament antitype of water immersion that cleanses wickedness. So there's all of these types that Moses is setting up, and here's another one where he talks about the life is in the blood, and even Noah was not allowed to eat here at the very beginning when mankind is given authority to eat the animals. He said, you can eat the animals, just you're not supposed to eat the blood. And that tells us how important the blood is of things. And then God goes on to say in verse 5, and surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, and at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. I'm going to go over to the ESV to read verse 5 and 6, just to kind of get a more modern phrasing for this. It says, in your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whosoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. Just 6 chapters into Scripture, and we've moved forward about 1,650 years in world history. It doesn't take long to read these chapters, and sometimes we can lose track of time quickly if we don't pay close attention. I have fallen victim to that many times, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that I talk so much about the chronology and talking about how long their lifespans were. And, I talk about the roughly 1,500 years. 1650 is probably a more precise number. But yeah, that's a great point, Steve, is that we're well over 1,500 years, which, keep in mind, for nearly 1,000 of those, 930 of those, the first 930 of those, Adam was alive. So we're kind of really only into the second generation. Seth doesn't live to the flood, and then there's a couple of others that come after. Enoch obviously didn't live to the flood, but Methuselah, he lives to the year of the flood. And actually, I think his son Lamech dies before the flood. Not sure why. 777 years doesn't actually bring him up to the flood. But those long lifespans are hard for us to picture because our own lives are so short. And then we look at them and we look at how much time has passed. And, for us, if we were to shrink this down, cut off a zero, 165 years, comparatively speaking, if you catch what I'm saying, for those of us who only live to be 100 years as opposed to nearly 1,000 years, it would be like 165 years passing for those people, in just the percentage of their lifespans and whatnot. So, excellent point. So here, God is saying that for your lifeblood, that's man's life, I will require a reckoning. So it's the human life that will really have an importance for here. For your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast, I will require it, and from man, from his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. So this is what God is saying here, what Moses is saying here, is that the life of man is of supreme importance. If an animal kills a man, that animal should be put down or hunted or whatever, but the animals were going to be dangerous now. They were afraid, but they are also dangerous to us, whereas before they weren't. And God is saying that there is a reckoning for taking the life of a man from both animals and from other men. He goes on to say that specifically if a man takes the life of another man, and here we're setting up this idea of murder. If there's an intentional taking, which we'll see later in the books of Moses, it's murder. It's not just any incidental or accidental killing that might take place. But if you murder somebody, then God is setting up the authority for man here to take a life. And I don't know, I haven't heard it as much about it these days. Maybe it's because of the circles I travel in. Maybe it's for other reasons. But this idea of the death penalty. The death penalty, I'm from Texas originally, so, death penalty is a big thing. There's a lot of controversy that surrounds it. There's definitely a lot of concern, specifically that I have about the way that our justice system works and metes out the death penalty. But sweeping all of the question marks aside, I am absolutely in favor of the death penalty for obvious, like, if it's cut and dried, absolute murderers. The people who are caught doing the vilest kinds of acts, I definitely think should be put down. They have given in fully to their physical self, to that side of us that's like the animals, made out of the dust like they were. And, like any animal, they should be put down. And then in the spiritual sense, God will sort them out. Have no qualms. There's no hint of hesitation in me whatsoever that the people who do the vilest of things, and I don't necessarily want to enumerate them here. I got my little one up here playing Zelda, but the death penalty is fine, and here is God setting it up. And he's saying that the reason for that is because the life of man is of supreme importance, because God made man in his image. It's because we have a soul that we are valuable, that we are above the value of humans. A lot of people going around today talking about how government is. Yes, yeah, absolutely so. In the sense that any kind of authorization or kind of a civil law or law system is set up. We know that there were laws, even in the Garden of Eden, there was a law, but a consequence or a punishment or a penal system for committing violations of law. Because remember, before the flood, God was there personally, and he was handling stuff. We see Genesis 4, God is personally handling violations of the law. Cain murdered Abel. They knew it was wrong because of the tree of knowledge. God handles it. And so God is there being the personal authority, but God is now stepping back. We're going to see this further and further. He's going to step further and further away from man in a direct conversation kind of way. And he's only going to speak through the patriarchs until we get to Joseph. And then there's going to be about 3 generations in Egypt. And then God's going to speak through Moses and through Joshua and through the prophets. And there's just this continual stepping back and further back. And so there's going to be more and more need for a code of laws to set up, especially to preserve the nation of Israel. A code of laws and a penal system to handle those who are disobedient to what amounted to a civil law for them, their constitution. But there are a lot of people today who are of the mindset that animals and humans are equal, and there's a bunch of different groups. Number one, atheists don't believe in a soul, say that humans are just the most evolved animal on the planet, but that we're no different from them, and they philosophically act that way. They don't necessarily practically act that way. The atheists don't practically act that way, although Richard Dawkins is coming pretty close. He's saying some pretty outlandish things. But there's other people who are kind of on the flip side of that, where they're bringing animals up to being equal to humans. And that is troubling to me as much as anything. We talk about our pets, our fur babies. Oh, that irritates me. We have a pet dog. And I've had pets my whole life, going all the way back. I can name every single pet I've ever had. I love my pets to the extent that we can love things, but never to the level that I've ever loved a human being. I don't, our dog Odin, he's a cool dog, great with the kids. He's well trained. He's a very peaceful dog. He's a great dog. He is not my child. And if it came down to it, and I had to choose between one of my children and my dog, sorry, Odin, you're a dog. You don't matter in the grand scheme of things. You lose that choice every time. And here is one of those places where it is absolutely set down that man is far more important than animals. He is infinitely more important than man. Than animals, because man is made in God's image. And there's no other way to say that. Steve, you've been doing some stuff on abortion on your lives, talking about the importance of that child that's inside the mother's womb, and the identity and the distinct identity. And one of the things that makes abortion so vile is that you have a human being in there. That human being has a soul, and you are shedding what is considered absolutely innocent blood. A child who has not had the opportunity even to make a choice yet. No choices have been laid before the child. And so there's this pure, pristine soul inside the most innocent, fragile human that we can conceive of. And these people are callously and selfishly taking that life. And God is saying that creature was made in his image, and we're taking that life. And because we have begun to treat humans as equal to animals, that this is where it's leading, and it's disgusting. And I believe absolutely whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. I have no compunctions whatsoever for much harsher penalties for those who are performing the abortions. I think that in some cases, and it's a good percentage of cases, the mothers who are going in for this are in need of help and counseling and support. And even after they've done this vile deed and participated in this vile deed, I think they need help and counseling and support and a redirection. But they have to understand that what they've done is wrong. For those women who get up and brag about it so that they can get their Oscar, or who talk about how awesome it is, or they go on and on, I believe that these are people much like those before the flood, where every thought and intent of their heart is wicked. And I have no mercy left in me for those kinds of people. Abortion is one of those things that it's hard to provoke me to get a rise out of me to an extreme level of emotion. That's probably one of the things, if not the most thing that will get me speaking like in anger because of that. So I think there's two classes of people. There are the moms that are scared, who are kind of programmed, who don't know any better, and who just need help before maybe to talk them out of it, to provide whatever support we can. Absolutely no penalty whatsoever for somebody for even talking about it or thinking about it. Same kind of person, scared and frightened, and we know the psychological effect that it has on those people afterwards, how devastating it is for them afterwards. And that kind of person needs to be treated with mercy and grace and love and helped with no penalty. But the woman who gets up and brags about it and is talking about how it's a wonderful thing and promoting it, and that type of person, I think, is not, like, I don't want to have anything to do with that person at the very best. And there's all kinds of things that I would personally do, not in a violent sense, but personally do if I understand that a person has done that and is that type of person. So, and it's case by case, and we have to understand we don't know all things, but by their actions, by their words, we can know them. And so that's, I don't know. I didn't even expect to get off on something like that tonight, but I think this verse is very, very clear about that. So let's see. Stephen said, "Amen." God setting into what I like to refer to as an end game concerning his epistemological distance from man. God was closer to man while partial revelation was all that was available, but when full revelation was known, God was then at his true distance from man's mind. No, I get it. The more God revealed to us in written form, the further he got to us in physical proximity. He's revealed all that he was going to reveal to us by the end of the 1st century AD. And the Bible is the mind of God communicated to us. And there isn't any more that we need. And so God calls us by the gospel. It is God reasoning with man, pleading with man to come be in a relationship. But he's rested his case, if you will. And man either accepts that and responds to it or rejects it. And that distance, that physical distance, is representative of the spiritual distance. So, Brian, abortion carries on the tradition of Molech and Dagon and Baal right down to the medical incinerator. Oh yeah, it's like man is, and I don't say man is stupid. Man doesn't have the capacity for new thought. We are incapable of creating absolutely ex nihilo new thought. And I've talked to my physics students about this. You can't have an original thought. And but what I mean by that is mankind is incapable of thinking of something that isn't already based on something that already exists. We have never been able to come up with something new. Even the idea of sins and the things that we could do wrong were granted to us by our knowledge of law. When God said, hey, it's wrong for you to do this, that's what gave mankind the thought, hey, that's a thing that I can do. You know, it wasn't that Adam and Eve weren't physically or mentally capable of doing things wrong. It just didn't ever occur to them what those wrong things were. The only thing they knew that they could do that they shouldn't do was eat of the tree. Well, then after it, they knew they were naked. They knew murder was wrong. There was a number of things that came along that are implied that they should not have done. But it was through revealed word. It was from God telling them, don't do this because that's bad for you. And so, yes, abortion carries on these vile traditions of ancient false gods, these fake gods that man has invented from creatures that he sees or dirt or metal things that he's made up. All of these things that he takes creation and warps it and makes it look stupid. And then I'm going to make up all of these rituals that are going to give me power, or I think give me power, and they don't really. And we're no different today. That's why the Bible is still relevant today, is man can't come up with new stuff that the Bible would never talk about. There isn't any way that we could talk about a new kind of thing that we might consider evil that the Bible hasn't already handled. It always falls under a category that the Bible has already handled. So spot on there, Brian. Absolutely. Yes, it is not just about babies. It's about babies and moms. I agree. Yep. Vile when they brag about it. Absolutely. Yep, Stephen's concurring with Brian there. There's nothing new under the sun. There is a way that seems right unto the man that leads straight to death. Yep, 100% quote straight out of the Bible. Agree with you right there, Brian. Well said. All right, so let's get back to some positive stuff here. Verse 7, and you be you fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. So we're going to go from the idea of killing other men to, hey, go out and have some babies, you know, spread your seed, fill the earth with people. I made it for you. And by implication, the whole universe. I'm anxiously waiting for this whole Space Force thing to just really take off and us to start moving out into the solar system. Warp drive was invented in 1996. The theoretical idea that we could actually build one of these warp drive ships was in Dr. Albuquerque in 1996. We're working on getting it more efficient, something that we have the power source to actually do. Man, I would totally love to go to, maybe I'm an old man, or at least my kids are grown or something, but after my kids are gone, grabbing the wife and hopping on one of these starships and heading to another star, oh, you talk about a dream. That's the top of my bucket list right there. But to get out and to explore God's creation, not just this one little dinky rock that he made for us, but just the rest of this vast universe would be so amazing. Anyway, and God spoke unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, so God's speaking to Noah and to his sons here. Genesis 8, still Elohim. And I think this is part of the distance that Moses is writing about. He's calling him Elohim and not Jehovah at this point. And I think we'll see this distance is going to continue. We'll probably see Jehovah or Yahweh from time to time. But I think we're going to see Elohim for a while until we get back to Moses writing about himself and saying, who shall I say sent them? And God's going to say, I am sent you. Tell him I am sent you. And we're going to start seeing more about this personal deity, this Yahweh or Jehovah that we saw back in the pre-flood time. So it says, and I, behold, I establish my covenant. That's a promise, a contract, a covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. So God's he's gonna make a promise, a covenant, a contract. This is a legally binding thing here. This is not just a whimsical, I promise I'll be there in 5 minutes. That's not that kind of promise. This is God, who never breaks a promise, making a covenant with mankind and with all of living things here. He says, I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there be any more be a flood to destroy the earth. Now again, it wasn't the planet that was destroyed, it was the living things. It was the particularly the people that were killed for their wickedness here. So again, that moves us forward to 2 Peter 3, which I have an article, swordmasterpublications.fandom.com, if you ever want to go read it. 2 Peter 3, you can just search for it that way and it'll pop up. And you can read about what I'm talking about there. One day in the far, far future, if I ever make it out of the Old Testament doing these one at a time, we might make it there. Verse 12, and God said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I like that idea of perpetual. There's some, hey Greg, welcome aboard. We're in Genesis chapter 9, verse 12. The idea of perpetual, this idea of forever, is a time statement. When God says that I'm going to give you this land forever, or I'm going to do this forever, we tend to think of that in generic terms. That okay, God's going to give the land of Canaan to the Israelites until the end of time. Well, that's not what that means. Forever is until, in this case, the covenant ends. But here we're talking about perpetual generations, meaning that it is going to be for as long as there is life. We saw in Genesis 8 that as long as there's going to be seasons and harvest time and all of these things, that it was never going to end. So God is being very specific here that this covenant was going to be, I'm not going to wipe out all of life with water. Yep, exactly so. So, yeah, it's a global flood, wiped out everybody. Had to be global because of the way that water works. unless you're a flat earther, and don't get me started. Verse 13, I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. Now, he's not making a covenant with himself and the planet. He just got finished making a covenant with himself and all the living things. So note that those, for Moses and now for the Israelites who he's writing for, he's intertwining this idea of earth with the people over and over and over again. And so that needs to be understood when we get into the New Testament and we start talking about a new heaven and a new earth. He's not talking about a planet. He's not going to recreate space. He's not going to, there's nothing wrong with his throne room. It's the people that really are, in a figure of speech called metonymy, where one thing that's easily understood and associated with is used to talk about a more complex related thing. We see this when we talk about the cup. Jesus says, take ye, drink all of it. This is my blood. When he hands him the cup, he's talking about this is my blood. He uses the cup and the blood interchangeably. He says the cup is poured out. Well, you don't pour a container. You pour out what's in the container. So you have this idea of metonymy. And so the earth is a metonymy for the people of the earth, the people that have the capacity for wickedness or not. Karis, what are you doing? Okay, don't do that. You're gonna hurt the leg. I need to tighten up the screw in that leg. Please don't do that. Yeah, please don't do that. Okay, I'll fix it later. Brian says the promises of God are forever. Hey Colton, we're in Genesis 9. We're about halfway down, about verse 13. Brian says the promises of God are forever. The promises to Abraham, Isaac, Joshua, and Noah are irrevocable as God does as he says. So, yes, I agree with that. But, right, Steve, that's 20 head of cattle is metonymous for the whole cow. We're not just talking about the head with the horns. It's the whole body. But the word forever is a specific meaning. When we get into the idea of God promising forever, God promised the land to the Israelites forever, but they lost it. Did God break his promise? No. God, yeah, my daughter's funny. We'll go with that word. God didn't break his promise when Israel and later the Jews lost the land, even though God said it would be yours forever. Forever, in the way that God uses the term, is for the whole time allotted. So God is going to give a covenant, and he says, I'm giving you a covenant to do this thing. I'm making this covenant with you for this purpose. And as long as this purpose lasts, my covenant lasts, and the promises of it last. And so we see that from the time that the Israelites enter into the promised land up until the time of Jesus, when they crucified him, there were a remnant of God's people living in that land. And so it was theirs forever. Even when there was Babylonian captivity for 70 years, there was still a remnant left in the land of Judea. So that's what God means when he says forever. God's covenant with Abraham was fulfilled in Christ. The Israelite nation had a purpose to bring Messiah into the world. That was the reason they existed. They weren't special in that they were superior to everyone else, even though they thought they were. In fact, we see time and time again how rebellious and obnoxious the Israelite people are. God wrestles with them. That's what the word Israel means, is one who wrestles with God because of what Jacob did. But the people of Israel just constantly were bickering with God and fighting against God, and eventually have the splitting of the tribes. The northern kingdom goes away into Assyrian captivity and is gone. They don't exist anymore. And then the three southern tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi remain until the time of Christ. They bring Christ in the world. Promise fulfilled, contract fulfilled. No, the covenant has been fulfilled, Brian. That's the point. The covenant was fulfilled. The contract was fulfilled in Christ. And when Christ was crucified, when they murdered the Son of God, God wiped them off the face of the planet as a nation. They were ended. No, they are not God's people anymore. The New Testament is very clear about that. Revelation is very clear about that. There is no purpose. I'll have to do maybe a sidebar since this question is coming up. Steve and I talk about this all the time. This gets into eschatology, the talk about the end times. It's not the end of the world, it's the end of the Jewish state, is what that is. It's the end of Judaism. But when the purpose of Israel was completed, the covenant was fulfilled, and then they were gone. Right, exactly so, Steve. Forever equals the duration of the covenant. So, Greg, I'll have to answer that question, because that's a long answer. Number one, because it's throughout the Bible, and number two, because so many have been taught wrong for so long. And so Brian is definitely going to have a lot of questions. You're probably going to have a lot of questions. There's a lot of people that are going to have a lot of questions. So, Steve, it's kind of funny because those three guys that you and I were watching last night, well, I say three guys, Abby, Solomon, and Julian, they actually agree with us on that point. So, Jews, Israelites, I mean, you can call them what you want. The people that were descended from Abraham, that were selected out as a nation, God gave them some promises and said, if you will do this, then I will bless you. If you disobey me, I will eliminate you once my promise to Abraham is fulfilled. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, and 32. Just go read it. Go read those three chapters, and it's very, very clear. Daniel asked in his later chapters, God, we messed up. We messed up bad. We're here in Babylonian captivity. Is this the end of this? And God says, no, I'm not done with you yet. But Daniel's like, well, what's going to be the end of my people? And he says, you got 490 more years. And then I'm going to be done with you. Because Messiah is going to be cut off at the end of the 69th week in Daniel chapter 9. So anyway, I want to get back to Genesis chapter 9 here so I can finish this up before midnight. And then we can come back and we can talk about those other things. Verse 13, I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. So this promise, this covenant, is actually, like we said in verse or in chapter 8, as long as the earth remains, as long as there's season and harvest and all of this. So we're talking about the physical land. As long as the planet's here, God's never going to destroy it, the surface of it, or wipe out all life again. So, hey, Buck, we're in Genesis 9. We're in verse 15 now. It says, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. Now, again, I'll point this out because I have to point this out for my Reformed friends. God says that the water shall no more destroy all flesh. Is Netanyahu disobeying after 3 terms? Oh, I have no idea. I'm not following Israel close enough. To me, the Israelis of today are a decent American ally, but they're just another nation. I don't follow it enough to know or care. So I focus on more important things, and to me, the Israel nation of today and the Israelis today are not important, not any more important than any other nation. So I don't know any more about them than I do like Germany or Yugoslavia or Greece or whatever. So do they even call it Yugoslavia anymore? I think they broke up. Anyway, So, anyway, God says that this is a covenant that I'm not going to destroy all flesh. Well, did God actually destroy all flesh? When he says all, did he mean like all individually, everybody without exception? Well, no. We have Noah and his family. We're not part of that all flesh. So again, we get into places like Romans chapter 3, verse 10 and verse 23. In Romans chapter 3 says, there's no righteous, no, not one. Well, is Paul speaking there of every individual? Well, he can't be, because Jesus was righteous. Or is Paul speaking in terms of generalities and hyperbole? Yeah, okay. Geography is not my thing. So I know there's 7 continents, and that's about as good as it gets for me. So Paul is not speaking of every specific individuality or individual when he is talking about there aren't any righteous people in the world. Later on in 1 John 3, it talks about there being righteous people. It talks about how Cornelius in Acts chapter 10 was a just man, righteous before God. So we have this idea of there are righteous people in the world. The generality is that just because you're a Jew or just because you're a Gentile doesn't make you righteous. Your nationality doesn't. Yes, hyperbole, exactly so. The idea that we exaggerate or we speak in a generality to get the point across, but we don't actually mean in a very precise, specific way. Right, exactly so. Noah and his family survived, yet all flesh perished. So that's the promise here. For somebody to say, well, there aren't anybody there's no humans that live sinless lives. Well, there's so much bad theology that's built off of that misunderstanding. That's what Calvinism is built off. To say that my little 6-year-old is some vile, evil sinner, that she inherited her guilt of sin from Adam is gross. Is a bad misunderstanding of what Scripture said, especially when Jesus has said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven." What's the kingdom of heaven made up of? A bunch of vile little rugrats that nobody can stand because they're totally depraved? No. The kingdom of heaven, which is the church, is not made up of totally depraved individuals. It's made up of people who have been made innocent of sin. And so they ask, well, do you know anybody that has lived a sinless life? Well, yeah, I can point to one right here in the room with me. It ain't pointing at me. But my little girl, she didn't know what sin is. She didn't understand the consequences. So there's no way for them to say that all precisely individually people have sinned. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah, there's no such thing as original sin. There's no such thing as inherited sin. Ezekiel 18:20 makes that absolutely clear. That such a thing is just silly. But there's people that believe it. A whole lot of people that believe it. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up that all flesh idea again because it's here, and it just over and over again it makes sense that it's hyperbole. Verse 18, and the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. That's important because where are the Israelites going? Why are the Israelites wandering for 40 years? You know, all of this ties in. It's not in a vacuum here. Remember, by the time that Moses is writing this, the spies have already gone in for 40 days to spy out the land of Canaan. Well, Ham is the father of Canaan. They know these people. So there's all of this tie-in that Moses is doing. So Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the 3 sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. All right, so whatever Noah was before, he decides after the flood, my family and I, we're the only 8 people left on the planet after all those people got wiped out for their sin. You know what? I'm gonna grow me some grapes. I'm gonna make me some beer. and I'm going to get drunk. That's what he does. Verse 21, and he drank of the wine and was drunk, and he was uncovered within his tent. Does the Bible say that Noah sinned when he did this? Was drunkenness a sin at this time? The Bible doesn't say so. In fact, we can go all the way over to Proverbs 31. I'm going to read that because it's kind of important to the context here. Proverbs 31, and you can go down to 6 and 7. Give strong drink, that's the Shekar. Give strong drink unto them that is ready to perish, and wine, hello Noah, unto those that be of heavy hearts. You think Noah has a heavy heart right now? He and his family are the only survivors of 1.8 billion estimated people. You think he's got a heavy heart? Give wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more. Not a sin to get drunk yet, just like incest wasn't a sin. Okay? And it's just, is it fair to assume no one knew of drunkenness at this point? Well, I just don't think there's any, there's no mention of it. We can't make a dogmatic claim about anything that isn't up to this point in time a thing that hasn't been stated. It says that Noah got drunk, but it doesn't say anything about whether or not that's a sin. We know murder is a sin because when Cain murdered Abel, God did something about it. So I'm not going to go beyond what the scriptures say about it. It just says Noah got drunk. And we know why. He's like, I'm going to grow me some grapes. I'm going to make me some wine, some yayin, and I'm going to drink myself to sleep because I just survived the end of the world. So, and beyond that, we're in Genesis chapter 9. If you want to read more about my feelings on alcohol, you can go to my website. Again, swordmasterpublications.fandom.com. I got an article on there that says Damning Alcohol Damns Jesus, and you can read that too. But anyway, so Noah gets drunk. We're in verse 22, and Ham, again, Moses writing to the Israelites who just spied out the land of Canaan where all these giants are, and they're all going to die because they don't have faith in God. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. Exactly. Statement of fact, nothing more. Verse 23, and Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it both on their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. Okay, so there is a lot of speculation that goes on about this. Just like there's a lot of speculation, I think incorrect speculation, that goes on about why Cain's sacrifice was not accepted. So let's see here. I'm gonna look at this word here. Ra'ah in the Hebrew. To see, look, behold, show, appear, consider, spy, perceive, regard, enjoy, lo, foreseeth, heed. To see, look at, inspect, perceive, or consider. To be seen. So, okay, so those are the tenses and stuff. Okay, to gaze upon. So there's a lot of people that want to say that, hey John, we're in Genesis, we're in chapter 9, and right now we are considering verse 23 where Ham looked at his dad while he was naked, but Shem and Japheth took a garment and walked backward in. Karis, could you turn that down just a little bit? You turned it up and I can hear it really good over here. Turn it down quite a bit. Keep going. Man, you turned it way up. Keep going. Alright, that's good. Yes. Gwen, I'm doing a live. What do you need? So anyway, there's a lot of people that speculate that Ham was lusting after his naked father. I do not see that in the text. What I see here from the text, because remember, this is pre Leviticus. Leviticus is when all of this sexual immorality is condemned. What I see here is a hearkening back to Genesis chapter 3, where Adam and Eve ate of the fruit and realized they were naked. And their husband and wife, they can see each other naked, but they're walking with Jehovah, and so being naked in front of other people is a problem. And I think that's what we're hearkening back to. I don't know if Ham was looking at his father with lust. I don't know that if he was looking at his father with disrespect. The only thing we know is that he looked at his father who was naked. And beyond that, we can't say. We can't speculate beyond what the word actually says. We do know that he went out and told his brothers. How did he tell them? Again, we don't know. Was it a come in, look at dad, he's drunk and he's naked? Was it disrespectful? Or was it, hey, come look at dad, he's awesome? We don't know. There's nothing in this text that says of other than Ham sees him naked in a way that's not appropriate, and comes out and tells his brothers, and then his brothers going backwards and lay the blanket over their dad. Again, do we ever see that Noah sinned in any of this? Do we ever have record of Noah sinning in all of this time? I don't see it written anywhere. It just doesn't say, and we can't assume. But here, Shem and Japheth take the garment, they lay it on their shoulders, and they walk backward, and they cover the nakedness of their fathers. Their faces were backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. I think that's where the problem is. Hey, Michael, we are in Genesis chapter 9. We're in verse 24 now. Steve says, I just heard about that last night from a friend that Ham was Ham saw. Yeah, exactly so. That's totally reading into it, Steve. You're exactly right. So why would he be looking at him with lust? I would say disdain. Yeah, I mean, naked drunk dad is probably more likely, but again, that's just speculation, Greg. But I'm with you there. No, actually, no. The "done to him" phrase does give pause. And Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done unto him. What done is just an action, though. What his son had done unto him, seen him naked, that's a doing. The seeing, looking is a doing. So I don't see it in here. I don't see the homosexuality. I don't see anything beyond what is written. So verse 25, and he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. Did Noah say Canaan? Did he actually use the word Canaan? Or is this Moses, by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, translating what Noah said? Maybe Noah said, cursed be all your descendants, Ham. We don't know. I would think that this is Moses kind of translating. I don't know that Noah is saying, hey, by the way, all your descendants are going to be called Canaan. I think this is Moses looking from his perspective back. And so Noah is saying, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. Let's see, what does Canaan mean? That's not what I looked up. Cursed be Canaan. Canaan. Traffickers, merchants. Canaan equals lowland. The fourth son of Ham. So humiliated from H3665, so that it comes from a word, Canaan, which means humiliated. to bring low, to be humble. So maybe it's a play on words, or maybe that's the beginning of the name is because cursed be the humiliated one. A servant shall he be. So there's, again, names have meanings all throughout the Bible. It's not just that they had this name, it's that their name meant something. And so here maybe Noah is, cursed be the humiliated son. And then we see that that's going to proceed on throughout the rest of the Bible up until this point in time where Moses is writing and they're talking about the land of Canaan that they spied out. Thanks, Steve. So I think one important thing to consider is that with historical narrative, the moral status of an act is not the focus. It's about what actually happened. I think we confuse and think that because something is recorded, the Bible must be speaking of it approvingly or disapprovingly. Yes, there's a lot of times where the Bible is just speaking of a thing, and the Bible doesn't say right or wrong about a thing. That's us projecting. That's us with our own, where did Cain get his wife? Couldn't possibly have been a sister because, ew, gross. Today, we look down on that, and culturally, that is a gross, evil, awful thing. But that's us projecting. Yeah, the son to be disappointed in. Very good, Greg. Thanks, Steve. But yeah, when we look at things in the Old Testament, there is a huge, even in the New Testament times, when so many people read the Bible, they read the Bible with this, how does it apply to me first idea? And that is the absolute wrong way to look at the Bible. When you are reading the Bible and you're trying to study the Bible, the best way to study the Bible is to understand the prime audience first. Like I keep saying, Moses is writing to the Israelites wandering in the wilderness for 40 years and trying to understand it from that perspective. That is the correct way. That is the correct way to understand the Bible. Personal application is secondary, and it should always be secondary. And it should also, personal application should also be generalized. When Jesus told the apostles in Acts chapter 1, go to Jerusalem and wait for me for power, to receive power from on high. Well, we don't follow that command. We don't go to Jerusalem and wait for the Holy Spirit to come down on us personally in little tongues of fire and all that nonsense. Well, not nonsense, but it would be for us, the charismatics and whatever they claim to be today. We don't do that. That's not a command to us. The Bible wasn't written to us. And so when we try to understand these passages, we try to understand them in the sense of the prime audience. And we know that the prime audience here is Moses writing to these just freed slaves wandering for 40 years. We understand it that way first. And then we make whatever applications make sense to our own lives from it. Most of the Old Testament doesn't have much in the way of specific application to us because we aren't under this covenant. In fact, Gentiles were never under the covenant of Moses. So anyway, let's see here. Verse 26, and he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. So verse 26, oops, I lost my place here. Verse 26. Yeah, so blessed be Jehovah God. So Noah is bringing us back. Moses is bringing us back. No, Steve, and you know better, does not talk about helicopters in Vietnam War. Yes, Michael, perspective is absolutely key. So blessed be Jehovah God of Shem. So that's the personal God of Shem. Now that's interesting. Blessed be Jehovah God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. God, Elohim, shall enlarge Japheth. It's not Jehovah God, it's just God, shall enlarge Japheth. And he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. I think there's a very specific precision here that the Holy Spirit through Moses is going for. Shem is where we eventually get the Semitic people, where we get Abraham from. And I think you're starting to see a narrowing down of God's focus to the particular nation that Moses is with and part of and writing about, where he's trying to bring the Israelite people into this relationship with this Jehovah God. Not the gods of Egypt that you've been dealing with for 3 generations, but this is the creator of the universe, and he is your God, and he has selected you out to be a people. And so you have Jehovah God of Shem, but then you just have creator God, Elohim, for Japheth, which is, again, you get into the apologetics and the creation scientists and the guys who kind of study the extra biblical stuff. Japheth was supposed to have headed up into the north, and this is where we get a lot of the Caucasian people from. All of the European people are from Japheth. The Romans, the Greeks, all of the the English eventually, the Germans, all of those people are all Japheth. So Japheth. The Semitic people, the Asian people, eventually the Native Americans, those all came from Shem, and then Ham, according to these people, were the ones that settled down in Africa and eventually became the darker skinned people. That does not mean that racism is valid. I despise racism to my very core. I'm just saying that this is the study that these guys who are studying this extra biblical stuff have said. But when we specifically talk about Canaan were the people that lived in the promised land that God had promised to Abraham eventually. And we'll see that as we get further into Genesis. So please don't. All right, Steve, take care. You always think everything was written to me. Just thinking about the way that Moses is relating this Jehovah God, personal God of Shem, God shall enlarge Japheth, a little bit of distance there between the Gentile nation. And then we get into the close here. Noah lived after the flood 350 years, and all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. A righteous man before God, survived the flood along with his family. He died. Never once do we have mention of Noah sinning. It's not mentioned anywhere from the time that we first read about him till that last verse when he dies. So Noah's one of those people I'd like to meet, because there's some things about him that I just want to know. So again, thank you guys for joining me a little bit longer than I expected. Man, I got off into some stuff, didn't I? But it's good. It's good when these things come up, and every time I go through this personal study, every time I get into getting down into this verse by verse stuff, I always learn something, or something occurs to me, or I want to go research this or whatever. So it's always a good thing to go back through this. Is not this Noah still being quoted, or do we give Moses poetic license? Or Job, Greg. Yeah, that's a great point. What do you mean, is this Noah still being quoted? Noah lived after the flood 350 years. Are you talking about verse 28 and 29, Brian? I think this is Moses writing by inspiration of the Holy Spirit. I think that the Holy Spirit is guiding him to write. So I don't know that 28 and 29 would have been a quote from Noah. I'm not understanding what you would mean. If you're talking about 26 and 27, yeah, I think we're looking at Noah and what Noah said through the lens of Moses. I think that we're talking about how Moses is trying to show the connection, the personal connection of Jehovah to the Israelites through Shem. The ending of the chapter, yeah, I don't think that's a quote. 28, 29 would not have been a quote of Noah. It doesn't even reference it as a quote of Noah. So I've been talking for a little over an hour now, and you can see I gotta keep drinking out of this thing. Can you imagine me being a teacher and talking for 8 hours? Yeah, I go through about 3 of these a day when I'm teaching. So anyway, thank y'all for joining me. Enjoy the discussion, enjoy the study, and we'll probably do 10 tomorrow night. Probably 9:30, 10 o'clock. Again, I'll get the twins in bed, and little bit's going to be up here with me because she goes to bed way later. So y'all have a good night, and we'll see y'all next time.